The Bible Story Read Aloud for Kids and Adults Part 4. 400 years after the death of Joseph's generation, the children of Israel were fruitful and multiplied on the land. During that time, the new Pharaoh became afraid of losing Egypt to the children of Israel. The king therefore turned against them and made them slaves. Around this time, the Israelites became known as Hebrews, and their lives became very hard. They told all the nurses to throw all the Hebrew newborns in the river to decrease their numbers. During this time, a Hebrew man and his wife, Jochebed, had a baby boy. They hid the baby for 3 months because they loved him dearly and did not want anything to happen to him. But when his parents could no longer hide him, his mother placed him in a raft and placed him in the river's bank. Suddenly, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river with her maids. When she saw the baby, she took him for herself. Because Pharaoh's daughter was young, she paid an older woman to nurse the baby. It just so happened that this older woman was the baby's real mother, Jochebed. Therefore, the child always had an attachment to his true heritage because he was raised by his birth mother for many years. When he grew, his mother took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and the princess named him Moses because she drew him out of water. Moses was therefore raised as the princess's son. When Moses grew much older, he understood that the Hebrews were being treated badly by the Egyptians. One day, a Hebrew man was being beaten by an Egyptian man. Moses intervened and killed the Egyptian, hiding him in the sand. When Moses realized that others knew what he had done, he ran away to a far land called Midian for fear of being punished. In Midian, he took care of sheep, married a woman named Zipporah, and had a son named Gershon. As many years passed, the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel remained frustrated because they were slaves. One day, while Moses was taking care of his flock, God began to speak to him through a burning bush. God told Moses he has heard the cries of the children of Israel. He told Moses to go back to Egypt and save the Israelites out of the hand of Pharaoh. Moses was afraid of doing this. God therefore proved his strength to Moses by turning his rod into a snake and then back into a rod. He made leprosy appear on Moses' hand and then healed him of the leprosy instantly. Moses' faith grew, but he still needed more help. Therefore, God had Moses' brother Aaron help him in this major assignment. Moses followed God's instructions and returned to Egypt with his anointed rod and his brother Aaron. When Moses arrived at the palace, he told Pharaoh, "Thus say the Lord, God of Israel, let my people go." Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go?" Moses warned Pharaoh many times to take his demands seriously, but Pharaoh would not. God therefore told Moses to encourage the Israelites and tell them that he is their God and they are his people, and he will deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians. God then sent 10 plagues upon Egypt, and these plagues affected the Egyptians alone and not the Israelites. First, Aaron stretched out the rod over one of Egypt's main water supply, the Nile River. The river water turned to blood, and all the fish in the river died. This lasted for 7 days, but Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites go. Aaron stretched out the rod, and frogs appeared all throughout the land, everywhere. But Pharaoh still said no. Aaron stretched out the rod to the dust, and lice appeared all over the people and the animals. But Pharaoh still said no. God sent swarms of flies throughout the land and frustrated the people. But Pharaoh still said no. God allowed all of the livestock in Egypt to die. But Pharaoh still said no. God sent boils upon all the Egyptians and their animals. But Pharaoh still said no. God sent hail, thunder, and lightning upon Egypt and destroyed the land. But Pharaoh still said no. God allowed locusts to cover the land and fill their houses. This destroyed their herbs, fruits, and crops. But Pharaoh still said no. After this, God allowed a deep darkness to come upon Egypt, which lasted for 3 days. The people of the land could not see one another, nor could they do anything. Pharaoh had then agreed to let the Israelites go, but quickly he changed his mind and again said no. God then told Moses to tell the Israelites to take a male lamb without blemish for each household. He instructed them to kill the lamb and to apply its blood to the doorpost and lintel of each house. At midnight, God passed through the land of Egypt, and all of the firstborns of every household that did not have the blood upon the doorpost died. But none of the firstborns of the Israelites died, for God had protected them by the lamb's blood. This event was named the Passover. Pharaoh's firstborn son died that night as well. That is when Pharaoh decided to let the Israelites go. The Israelites left Egypt that night very quickly as God instructed them. It was a multitude of people, cattle, flocks, and items for their journey. God led them with a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day to Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, also known as the Promised Land. But after the Israelites left, Pharaoh changed his mind and sent his army after them. The Israelites were devastated when they saw Pharaoh and his army chasing them, but Moses told them not to fear because God will help them. God miraculously made a road in the middle of the Red Sea, and the Israelites hurried through the sea on dry land. Once they made it to the other side, God allowed the waters to come together again, drowning Pharaoh's army as they tried to pursue them. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea into the wilderness of Sinai. The Israelites immediately became angry with Moses because they did not have clean drinking water. But God told Moses to cut down a tree and throw it into the water. When Moses did so, the water became good to drink. The Israelites then began to complain, stating that they were starving while out in the desert. They even said to one another, at least they had meat to eat when they were in Egypt. God heard their complaints and showed them a miracle. He rained down bread from the sky for them to gather and eat. This bread was called manna. God also sent them quails from the sea to eat as well. After 3 months on their journey, they arrived at Mount Sinai. They remained there for a year. At Mount Sinai, God spoke to Moses and gave him the 10 Commandments and other laws which he wanted the Israelites to live by. The 10 Commandments stated, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make unto yourselves any graven images. You shall not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet." God also gave Moses very special instructions to build a tabernacle. A tabernacle was a portable sanctuary built by the Israelites as a place of worship while traveling through the desert. They carried the tabernacle with them. The tabernacle had several important elements. The outer court was where most of Israel gathered and worshipped. Only the priest could enter the tabernacle. Once the priest entered, he would encounter the altar of sacrifice located at the entrance. It was wood and covered with copper. It was where the blood sacrifices of clean lambs and goats would be offered in fire unto God for the forgiveness of Israel's sins. At this time, Israel's priest was Aaron. The lava of washing was the second furniture encountered, which was a wash basin for the priest. It was made of polished copper. The priests had to clean and wash their hands and feet before they went further in the tabernacle. The holy place was next, which contained the golden lampstand, the golden table of shewbread, and the golden altar of incense. Here the priests entered to perform service and worship unto God. The golden lampstand was designed to hold 7 bowls filled with olive oil to provide light. The light was never to go out. The golden table of shewbread stood directly opposite the lampstand. 12 loaves of bread were set on it once a week. During the week, the bread was to be displayed before God, and on the Sabbath day, the priests were to eat the bread. The golden altar of incense was the third piece of furniture located in the holy place. This altar was for the priest to burn incense. The incense was a special blend recipe of herbs sanctioned by God, which sent out a fragrant aroma when the priest lit it at morning and evening. The holiest of holies was the next place in the tabernacle. There was a curtain set before it as a veil. The high priest only entered this area once a year on a special holiday called the Day of Atonement. In the holiest of holies, the Ark of Covenant and the mercy seat were placed. The Ark of the Covenant was a chest made out of wood covered with gold. This chest contained the 10 Commandments, a golden pot of manna, and the rod used in Egypt. The mercy seat was the cover of the Ark of the Covenant. It was made with solid gold with 2 cherubims mounted on top. Once a year, the high priest would sprinkle the sacrificial blood from the brazen altar unto the mercy seat to obtain forgiveness of sins for all of Israel. Overall, although God loved the Israelites and wanted to reveal his power to them, the Israelites did not follow his laws. They did a lot of things which dishonored God. Because of this, they wandered around in the desert for 40 years. Many of the older Israelites died in the desert, leaving Moses and their offspring. Before Moses died, God anointed a young man named Joshua to become Israel's leader. After Moses died, Joshua, along with another courageous young man named Caleb, led the young Israelites into the promised land, Canaan. To enter the land of Canaan, the Israelites had to cross the Jordan River. God parted the river just as he parted the Red Sea, and they walked through this river on dry land. The Israelites thought it was going to be easy to inherit Canaan, but it wasn't. Canaan was already inhabited by many nations, and these people were warriors and dangerous. The Israelites had to fight with these nations to acquire the land God had promised them. This was a scary and hard job, but God was with them. What happened in the city of Jericho was a miracle. Joshua and the Israelites had to seize Jericho, a city with big walls. They marched around the walls, shouting and singing for 7 days, and miraculously, the walls fell down. This allowed them to defeat this city and seize their land. God was with the Israelites and allowed them to be victorious in many battles. The Israelites won some of the battles and lost some as well. Whenever they were disobedient to God and did whatever they wanted to, God did not help them, and they would therefore lose the battle. But when they obeyed God, He would fight for them and they would win. The Israelites were able to acquire most of the land God had promised them. God gave them rest from the battles, and they began to live a peaceful life for many years until Joshua became an old man. Before Joshua died, he encouraged the Israelites to follow God because they have seen his power. But he warned them that if they refused to follow God, they would lose this peace. When Joshua died at the age of 110, it was acknowledged that the Israelites served God all the days of Joshua.